Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Alliance, your home on the Geek Ultimate Alliance podcast network for any and all things Star Wars. I'm your host, as always, Katie, and with me, like always, most of the time, unless he's on like paternity leave or something, it's Clay. Clay, how are you doing?
I am doing good. I had told you right before we went live that I have started new medication. I've been really tired. I've been feeling it a lot. Um, so if we have to do an out of an ordinary time slot for recording, just know that I'm just like last time. I might take a nap and I might have to jump in mid recording.
Like
No, but
next week is what you're saying. When we go
oh,
live at 9 p.m.
that's right. We are going live at a different time next week. I will remember it is later in the day. But the great thing is, like always, I have my caffeine pills. I'm slowly leaning off of the sodas, but I still use the caffeine just to kind of lean off a little bit easier. But yeah, I should be able to handle a late recording on Star Wars. It shouldn't be a problem whatsoever.
We'll see what happens.
Well, actually, uh, and I dubbed this on the Twitter post just now, but I think we should run with it because I think it's fun. The road to Ahsoka.
Ooh.
Next week is a continuing road to Ahsoka because, of course, this week is we are reviewing, of course, Dark Force Rising. I gave very minuscule thoughts on it when I first finished the book. We didn't get a full review out of it, but since we know it's going to be the first iteration of live action Thrawn, and you brought up a really interesting concept for the Ahsoka series that could be taken from this book. And I want to bring that up just because it is a huge talking point of this book. But next week we will be reviewing the Last
Last
Command.
command. Yep.
Yes, the Last
Have you
Command.
read that one, or did you only
I
get the first one?
I only got to finish a Dark Force Rising, but here's the thing, Katie. Because of how hectic I have been, running around with my head cut off, I have been listening to the book on my desktop. I never do that. I always listen to either in the car or on my phone with Bluetooth headphones. So on the desktop, I had to search for the title again, go back to where I was in the title, checking the chapter, clicking it, pressing play. I pressed play and it sounded completely different. And I went on for like four different chapters until I realized I just jumped into the middle of the last command. Um, I had zero context of to what was going on. I was like, why is this character doing this when they were just doing that? What is going on? So yeah, I've listened to four random chapters in the dead center of Last Command. So I had to go back and re-listen to uh where I was in Dark Force Rising for the second reread. But yeah, very interesting. So I'll have a little bit of context for what is about to happen in Last Command, but I still don't know anything about like the very beginning and whatnot. So it's gonna be fun.
Will be. And you said we should entitle the next month and a half ish the Road to Ahsoka. And that's a good time to bring up that SAG-AFTRA has agreed to strike. We had kind of talked about it last week. Um, in that we were like, you know, negotiations are up today. They could be striking tomorrow. We could see what happens. And they did end up striking. They agreed to strike. So I think we're on day 6 today. So tomorrow, Thursday makes 1 week. But in the benefits of like transparency, Twitter went wild because SAG-AFTRA includes influencers. And so there's a big proponent of like being supportive of the strike, but also like solidarity, and then also trying to make sure that you're not scabbing, aka crossing picket lines, doing work for companies, and etc. So SAG-AFTRA did come out and say Critics, journalists are more than welcome to continue doing their job. But please note, like, anything sponsored by the studio is like not bueno kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. Anything paid by the studio promoting their works or what they call struck work, um, and they even said to a point past and present. So that's going to be a little confusing. I know that there's still some very odd requests, like the cosplaying thing. Um, that's going to be very muddy waters when it comes to this week at San Diego Comic Con. I'm going to be very interested to see how many Blue Beetles I will see, or how many
Mhm.
Ahsokas, or things that are coming up in the future. It's going to be very, very weird to see, in all honesty, and the conversation surrounding it. But one thing that we wanted to bring up is the fact that we do support the writers and actors that are on strike. I was very hesitant on this just because, due to the fact that I am going to school to be an audio engineer, there's a possibility of me working with these individuals. So I was kind of sticky on, like, hey, can I talk about this stuff in the future? But Katie did say, due to the fact that it is a separate department, like, I couldn't technically even be a part of SAG to a point, but yeah, so it is safe. And even SAG has said, hey, if you guys are podcasters, uh y'all can review work, y'all can go to the movies and support our work. So that's a big thing for me, and wanting to see Blue Beetle next month as
Mhm.
well. I was like, how do I go see this movie without looking like a scumbag? I do not look like a scumbag anymore, so I'm totally fine with it.
Well, and the biggest thing, and this is what the writers pushed out immediately, kind of when they started striking at the beginning of May, was that you don't want to necessarily cancel streaming services or like not go watch something, because then that's backing up the studio's idea of, well, we're not making any money on this. Because the biggest thing right now, with the negotiations is like getting streaming residuals, and then like AI work and stuff, and trying to narrow down guidelines and stuff for that. And the studios don't want to release streaming numbers. They've never released streaming numbers. So in getting stuff like that done, the hope is that they can push for these things. But the important thing is to continue watching and supporting the work if you're not being paid by the studio, because then that's showing the studio, hey, they're still watching, kind of thing. They're still making us money right now. But studios, Lucasfilm, please pay your damn writers, please pay your damn actors. Get your shit together.
Yeah, and honestly, and I know we'll move on to the main topic here in a couple minutes, but one thing that I never really took in context until I can't remember which actress said it on the picket line, but they're explaining about how, like, uh in order to even be eligible for, like, health insurance, they have to make so much money within a year. And you're like, oh, you know that it person that you see in so many streaming shows in 1 year, or like so many uh TV broadcasts in 1 year, like, yeah, they're working hard and they're getting more popular and they're going to be in more shows. That's not just them having a really good year. That's them literally trying to survive
Yeah.
and getting to the point of being eligible for healthcare. That's insane. That's, like, we have to hustle ourselves as little people, as we say, but there's little
Mhm.
people in Hollywood as well. And I think that's what a lot of people, like, misconstrued, is just like, just because you're an actor does not mean that you're immediately a millionaire, you know?
Yeah.
So there's still a ton of people in the background that get paid very, very little.
And that's what the strike is for. And now I know I've seen on Twitter several other Star Wars podcasts have gone, we're gonna, not kind of talk about anything film or TV related on our podcast until the strike is over, in solidarity and stuff. And I think that's a choice that everybody kind of needs to make for themselves. We will be talking about Ahsoka, and obviously, right now, that's the opinion. But if things change, we'll let you guys know. But currently, right now, our plan is to still review Ahsoka
Yeah.
when it comes out in just over a month. So,
And the thing is, with the fact that, A lot of people are concerned about like the amount of content that will be there for the next year and upcoming months and whatnot. The I guess silver lining, I'm not going to say good side of this because there's not really a good side of this, but the silver lining of this is that we do have an audience that does read the High Republic books and Star Wars novels, which we are a very big fan of. And so that will still continue to happen here on this podcast as well.
Absolutely. And if I get Clay to read more Legends books, if I get him to read Phasma, we'll be like fine and dandy right here, fine and dandy.
All right. Well, we do have some news topics. Where do you want to go with first, Katie?
Let's go ahead and talk about Bob Iger because I feel like this is the most Debbie Downer thing other than the strike that we have to talk about. And by the way, we'll have a disclaimer at the front of every show, like, hey, we support the strike, like studios pay your authors, but today's podcast is the longest we'll go in the discussion unless something new happens. You never know.
Yeah.
Okay. So, talking about the strike, uh Bob Iger, which I guess he was picked to go on CNBC to talk because everybody has loved Bob Iger. I guess that was the decision. Like, he is the sacrificial lamb. Let's try and get some good PR out of this.
Well, and I think it definitely, because I made a really good point in our GUA chat, is I was like, and I called him the good Bob. Because I would always reference bad Bob. I was like, this is bad Bob, this is good Bob. And I think it was always like he's the world champ. Like he's the people's champ. Iger is. Whenever it came to the decisions for Disney and everything else. But again, his words this past week and his actions are, he's still a billionaire and he's always going to be separated by us due to that fact. And his intentions and his ideologies and everything else are so different from all of ours. But what was it that he said that you're wanting to zone in on here?
So he was asked, and I don't have the question in front of me. But he was asked if Disney, I believe the context is that would Disney be pulling back on IP content, specifically talking about Marvel? And he said, now Star Wars Newsnet has it phrased as, will they be pulling back on Marvel and Star Wars? I didn't watch the interview, not entirely certain. But he said, yes, you pull back not just to focus, but it's also part of our cost containment initiative. Spending less on what we make and making less.
How do you feel about this? Now, of course, there has been a influx of, and of course, many of us are seeing the box office of a lot of these different movies. Star Wars hasn't had uh, a box office in quite some time. So, in regards to like the shows that we're seeing being, pushed to TV broadcasts, recently we saw the
Miss Marvel.
Miss Marvel being pushed on, I believe, I can't remember which channel it was going to be
NBC.
on. Okay, yeah. But we have seen the Acolyte when not Acolyte, sorry, Andor. When I think near the tail end of the first season was coming out, it was announced that the first 2 episodes, or at least the first episode, I can't remember, maybe even first 3, were being broadcast on FX.
Yeah.
So we are seeing it with Lucasfilm content, at least very smallly, with Andor.
Yeah.
But how do you feel about spending less? Well, let's take it as 2 different things. Spending less on Star Wars content. What does that mean, and what does that look like in your eyes?
So to me, that means I think they're going to with new content.
Mhm.
Specifically because like I'm not including like Acolyte or Andor here. Like I think like developing new shows, new movies, I think they're going to be looking for lesser known talent to capitalize on name reliability and everything. Um, because I think that ultimately that's kind of where your biggest cost can come into play. Like Carrie Ann Moss, they don't know how much she cost for the accolade. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't want to know. But like Pedro Pascal, for instance, popular guy right now, like super popular, making bukus of money on The Last of Us. I remember seeing like contract numbers there. I don't know what he's making on The Mandalorian, but like maybe it's like, hey, we're gonna bring The Mandalorian to a close sooner than we thought because we want to try and like remove some spending. Maybe it's negotiating. Um and like I know like I think Robert Downey Jr., for instance, was like, I will take less money up front, but I want more in residuals, kind of
Yeah.
thing. Maybe it's something along those lines. Granted, again, we don't know streaming residual numbers. So
Yeah.
it it would be interesting to see. I also wonder if that means we're going to be getting more location scouting. Because the the stage
Volume.
volume, thank you. I was gonna call it the view. um the volume with all the special effects and lighting, I'm sure, and not to say you don't have lighting on like a set or anything, but like I imagine like trying to negotiate everything and creating those visual effects for the scenes and everything, you're going to be spending a lot of money on that. Whereas maybe if you go rent a place and bring all the lighting that you would have at the volume, maybe that's less money guaranteed up front. So maybe there's more of that involved.
Hmm. I was thinking, more practical effects is of course really cutting down costs. Gonna be very interesting to see. Of course, we saw the backlash recently on uh overworking animators
Mm-hmm.
and special effects artists. So there's a lot of things at play with the entertainment industry within the next few years that are really going to either see it buckle or hopefully see it thrive. um but making less, we're already seeing very minimal Star Wars here. Um,
In That's where I feel like this question was misinterpreted. And maybe he was specifically boiling down in on the MCU, potentially. Um, like, and we say we're seeing less for Star Wars. We did see a cut down on publishing this year,
mhm,
I feel
yeah,
like. We had bukus of books last year. We almost had a book every single month last year.
yep,
And High Republic aside, I mean, we had Fallen Order book, I can't remember the name, and then we've had Rise of the Red Blade. And then currently the only other book scheduled for this year is Crimson Climb.
yeah.
Not High Republic related.
Jedi Survivor was Battle Scars. Yeah,
Yeah, Battle Scars. Um so it's like they may be cutting costs in other places by like limiting publishing and stuff, but I don't see them cutting back on Star Wars. Like I see like, hey, if we can hit 3 shows a year and maybe a movie, I still think that's fine for Star Wars. I like it when Star Wars is narrowed down and focused on a story. I don't know. I know a lot of people are like, I want to see more Star Wars. I want to see it. But like this year, we've had a lot of Star Wars, and we still got Ahsoka, more Young Jedi Adventures coming August 2nd, and then Skeleton Crew is supposed to premiere this year still as well. So I think he's more addressing Marvel versus Star Wars.
yeah. I would hope so. Just because all the points that you pointed out too. Um, and for the fact that we just got 3 movies announced for Star Wars, so I'm hoping that they're not like, oh, he said we had to cut back, so one of you has to get the axe. So that would be very, very disheartening. But what else do we have in the news?
All right. So the next bit was actually something that came out today. And it is an interview that John Boyega did with Tech Radar before the SAG-AFTRA strike started. And he was talking about like he was asked a question about his criticisms um and refusal to work with Disney and Lucasfilm again. And he said that was a few years ago, so those comments were the subject of that particular project. And then he said, but I'm open to all characters and scripts that are enjoyable, have a great cast attached, and a terrific director. So yeah, I'm open to all opportunities. Everybody's going, okay, where's John Boyega in the Daisy Ridley Ray movie that's coming out?
Hmm.
Because the whole thing with the Rise of Skywalker is it was kind of like the every time he said Ray, it was like he wanted to bring up, hey, I think I'm force sensitive.
Yeah, I I hope he's there.
Mhm.
Do I think it's going to happen though? I don't personally know. We had a very small conversation about this in the GUA chat. You and Snow were going back and forth. Uh, you know, and the number one thing is always like, oh, all you have to do is back up the money truck, and then there he's gonna show up, right? Um, but I'm not entirely sure. Uh, I think that lessons have been learned, and if John Boyega sees that he is not really in the limelight and is kind of a small part, he's probably not going to want it, to be honest, compared to what he had gotten. And, you know, his hopes, I would think, were to be if you're going to offer me something after what I said about Star Wars and my role in Star Wars, then your only reason why you're wanting to ask me to be on this is to give me a bigger role. And if you're going to give me an even smaller role, why would I even jump on that? You know?
Yeah. And he did come out and say after the interview published, he said on his Twitter, and I have been following John Boyega for a while, so like he's not verified on Twitter, but I know this was his account. Um, and he said, if I am cast in any new projects, trust me, you will hear from me on any of my social media platforms. There's no news so far, so disregard any article that says otherwise. None of them have the exclusive. I'm open to sleeping right now. And I don't think he's necessarily talking about the interview that he did because obviously he knows what he answered in the interview. Like
Yeah.
everything's legit, like it goes through a PR person. Like if he said something that was like, "Yeah, can we take that out?" That's not going to get published. So, I think this is because I did see some articles that were like, "Oh, John Boyega back in Star Wars" kind of thing, bait shit. As per usual. Because him kind of saying this kind of opens the door and everything. So, yeah, he's not been cast in Star Wars yet. He's just saying, you know what, I could be open. And one of the things I told Snell was like, you know what, he may want a bigger money ticket to continue funding the indie artistic pictures that he's on right now. Because
Yeah.
I mean, he did The Woman King. I think he's done a couple other streaming movies, and then They Cloned Tyrone, I think is the movie that he's interviewing
That's
for right now.
that's the one that I was just about. I don't. I Is it a theatrical release or is that a streaming movie?
So it is a Netflix release, but I do think it's still lower budget.
Okay.
And I think it was like Jamie Foxx's last role before he got injured and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, and so I say like indie very loosely is like a not IP sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Andrew is in the chat. He said, "I'd like to see John again. His character was very underused." Um, I wouldn't say he was underused. I think he was almost forgotten about by the last movie. So because I still think he had uh good parts in the Last Jedi. I think that that was
Yeah.
kind of like we saw the inklings of him kind of like being a side thought. Um, but it was all right there. I love the idea of him being force sensitive, and
Yeah.
him never having the chance to say it. Like, because one thing, even if it was kind of just like thrown out there, just to put another plot point within the kind of mess that the Rise of Skywalker was, I think that you still have an inkling of like, hey, there could be something after this. And that's what fans want, right? They want to be like, hey, move the story forward. I want to have more content. Uh, so even having that little inkling there, it intrigues us. And it's like, okay, if you're going to put that out there, then put it out there, you know? So I would still be okay with seeing him in there.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely want him back in Star Wars. Like, I feel like he had so much potential that I just want to see the right filmmaker pick him up. And I think, oh my gosh, I can't remember the director's name. The Miss Marvel director who's directing the Rain movie. With her kind of being a person of color, I think she can understand things a little bit more and she'll manage the set in a different way to make sure that things aren't happening on set like they were reportedly from John Boyega and everything. So,
Yeah.
and I know I can't remember if it was like he talked about Rise of Skywalker. I'm fairly certain, but like, did he talk about Last Jedi too? I feel like he talked about Last Jedi too. I don't remember.
I'm not entirely sure.
All right, so we have two more pieces of news to talk about. So Timothy Oliphant did an interview. Um, and I don't he had an interview with Rolling Stone and he was asked about working in the Star Wars galaxy and he said I've enjoyed that. I don't know if it's a cash grab or I'm just getting lazy, but I'm okay playing the greatest hits right now.
Wait, say that quote again? He what?
He's he okay, so he was asked about working in the Star Wars galaxy and he said I've enjoyed that. I don't know if it's a cash grab or I'm just getting lazy, but I'm okay playing the greatest hits right now.
How do you not know if it's a cash grab? You're the one that took the role. I was very
And
confused
maybe
by
he's
his words
just
there.
I don't think he phoned in the role. I've called Chris Pratt out for like phoning in roles before, so I'm not afraid to like do that, but I don't think he phoned in the role at all, which would be like my definition of cash grab.
And but here's the thing also with me and Timothy Oliphant. I think ever since Justified. Now, it's completely different for his there was a Netflix show that he had with oh, this I can't remember what it was called. It was a zombie show. Uh
Looking it up.
it it grossed me out by the first episode, so I didn't watch the rest of it. Uh but Timothy Oliphant, ever since Justified, has kind of played the same character.
Yeah.
The grizzly sheriff type, uh, and he's always been like the grizzly suave guy, which I have no problem with. I think he plays it very very well. I think for me, uh, I started recognize him after the fourth Die Hard movie was when I was like, that's when I finally started to realize, like, hey, this guy is starting to be in a lot of movies.
Was
But that
it
was just
Santa
me.
Clarita Diet?
Yes, that one. In the very first episode, uh, there's like projectile vomiting, um, for like a good 5 minutes, and it's just like, yeah, I was eating dinner. I'm just gonna stop. Um, no, but but I liked his role in, of course, Book of Boba Fett. They teased him for more. Um, honestly, I don't think we will see him again in live action. I expect him to be a main character of a book or seeing him again in comics, but that's just me. Um,
He is in Aftermath, the interludes there.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah, he is. Yeah, yeah.
Um, I am gonna disagree with you there. I think we're gonna see him again.
Really?
I think you have to because I think we have to know, like, did he die or not? I think it's important.
It, but is it though? No, no, no. Not saying that his character is not important, but is it very important to the story that's being told right now to know if he lived or died? Because the last thing we saw was him in the bank tank, so we automatically assume he's just going to survive, right? Like
I guess that's true.
that's just my way of thinking. I think if anything, I'll eat my own words. Um, if we see him in Filoni's Heir to the Empire, because I think that would be an oh shit moment. Like if we don't see or hear about him for all of these years, and then we're in the theater and we the crowd goes crazy over Mandalorian first time on the big screen. We see Ahsoka, we see Luke Skywalker again, whatever, and all of a sudden we're on Tatooine and we see Timothy Oliphant again. We're like, oh, like I think that'll be a moment. But I think that's the only moment. I think it's Heir to the Empire. I don't think we see him again in a streaming show.
Alright, we'll see. We'll see what happens. All right, the next bit out of this Star Wars News net piece. Tamir Morrison was recorded while signing autographs at the London Film and Comic Con, which took place July 7th through the 9th. And he said, there's a few things happening in LA. I'm going to stop by LA on my way home to New Zealand just to have a catch up and see what's happening in the galaxy.
Who was that? I didn't catch the name. Who
Tamir
was it?
Morrison for Boba
Tamara
Fett.
Morrison. Yeah. So we assume he is
He's
what?
not willing to give up the book of Boba Fett, not the book of Boba Fett, the Boba Fett role. He
Yeah.
doesn't want to. And I know he definitely like spoke out about the Mandalorian coming in and taking over 2 episodes of a show. He said that for sure.
Yeah.
But he doesn't want to be done with Boba Fett. He wants to continue with the role. What do you think about that?
I think that this is hard. Um because we for the most part enjoyed the Book of Boba Fett. Was it
Yeah.
silly? 100%. Um did Mando, 2.5 come out at the very tail end of the show? Yes, it did. Um but how much longer can he play that role? Like, and I'm not going to body shame or discriminate with age or anything else. I'm just seeing the facts. Like, we've seen people like Hugh Jackman take on the role of Wolverine for 18 years and him say, "Hey, I'm done." Him legitimately take a long break, and then now he's back for Deadpool, which is totally fine. And they're taking into regard his physique and his illnesses with sun cancer into that production, with the long sleeves and
Mhm.
everything else. With Morrison, like, I'm just thinking, okay, how old are you? How much longer can you do this role? Like,
He's
uh
62.
he's 62 years old. I don't know if he can.
Harrison Ford filmed Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull at 65.
Yeah, but does Harrison Ford have to put on Mandalorian armor and walk around in the beating sun with
Very good
all that
point.
on, I think that is a big part of it. Even freaking Pedro Pascal was saying, like, putting on the costume was it was a lot. It got high. Like, he even was like, because I think Pedro is late 40s, early 50s, and he was complaining about the armor. And it's a legitimate thing. Like, you're having to stay in that costume for hours on end. And granted, say what you will about Pedro having to just come in for a day's worth or whatever, filming the parts where he has to, show his face because all of last season was just his voice and all he had to do was ADR. But
Mhm.
with Morrison, I think you could almost do the same.
Mhm.
I genuinely think so. Um, the idea, because I think everybody, everybody was very, what's the right words I'm trying to find here? They were intrigued by not knowing who Boba Fett was, right? It was
Yeah.
just the mask. He looked cool. Same thing with the Mandalorian. We knew
Mhm.
Pedro Pascal was there, but we never saw his face. So we're like, oh, that's so cool. He never takes off his helmet. He's true to the cause. And then it made it that much
Mhm.
more emotional when he actually took off his helmet. Now,
Yeah.
I feel like Morrison's face is everywhere. With him, being Jango Fett, with him being Boba Fett, with him having the mask off for the majority of the book of Boba Fett. Um,
Yeah.
so it would be kind of weird if there was like more than 2 episodes of him just not taking off the helmet. People would be like, "What's going on?" Um, but I don't know. Like it's kind of the same idea with how we feel about Luke Skywalker. If
Yeah.
he's gonna be in the show or in the movies, give somebody else another opportunity to play that iconic character.
I think that's what you end up doing if you move it to where he's younger. And like you want to try and maybe tackle like season 2 of Obi-Wan Kenobi, for instance. Say that happens. That would be a place where I would say, okay, we need to go younger for Boba Fett.
But you could still technically do that. But he was also a clone in the first season of the of Obi-Wan.
Right, but I think you can get away with that because Boba was not Boba is a younger, like
Yeah.
he was an unaged clone.
Yeah.
So with all of the clone troopers and everything, their growth rate was sped up. So I think that makes sense for Tamura to play that clone looking for money on the side of the street in Obi-Wan. But playing Boba Fett and managing the bounty hunter role, especially with what we got in War of the Bounty Hunters, um, I think it just makes sense for somebody to come in if you did that earlier. If he's if he's gonna be in the like Mandalorian season 4, season 5, Heir to the Empire, etc. Book of Boba Fett season 2. I don't think you replace him. I think his age makes sense, and I think in Book of Boba Fett it showed his age and how he was struggling with things. So and like the physicality of everything, like I think it just honestly made sense the way he was played in Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
And I think that's possible for that to continue. Do you maybe make a plastic Mandalorian armor for him to wear in the heat? I mean, Book of Boba Fett was filmed on the volume, so he's not necessarily baking out there in the sun. But I mean, the with the mask on, with the helmet on, he can be played by somebody else, be played by a stunt double, do the ADR. But then I think he's perfectly fine to continue in role.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. If there is a reason for him to be younger, definitely don't try to DH him. Just pick somebody else. I think that makes total sense.
All right, so the last and a final bit of news. Leslie Headland, in an interview with EW, explained how the Acolyte fits in the grand timeline of the Star Wars stories. And mainly, she talks about here how difficult it was to make a Star Wars with no war in it. Because the Acolyte is set roughly 50 years before the Phantom Menace. There is no war happening right now. There's no galaxy crisis with the Nihil going on. And so creating it, she said, where's the quote? Oh, wait. The Acolyte stands out because it is the earliest in the Star Wars timeline that we have ever been in live action. We are towards the end of the High Republic, leading into George's prequels, so we are looking at a time period where the Jedi are at the height of their power. We're looking at a time period where there is peace throughout the galaxy. It was very challenging and interesting to make a Star Wars with no war in it. So the question became, well, what should the show be about if it's not about galactic conflict? The answer to that question was quite simple, according to the headline. Focus on the villains. In The Acolyte, the villains are the underdogs and serve as the point of view of the story. And she says more, but we can talk about that first part first.
Well, I think this is a very interesting conversation for us to have, considering we have been reading all of the High Republic. Um, and of course, we know Star Wars. Um, and I don't know if it's necessarily that hard because, like, you have some of the little inklings that has been left in the prequels, like Palpatine and talking about Darth Plagueis and all of these other things. Like, you could have dove in there a little bit and possibly done something, but I know that, like, with how people kind of approach Star Wars whenever they're allowed to direct is like, hey, we have to go through Filoni, which is like kind of the back door to George Lucas, and we get things approved and not approved. And I think it would have been a little bit more difficult to do that. It is an interesting aspect, though. Um, how can there be conflict when there is no conflict? Is
Mhm.
the essential problem that she had. Um, and you just create conflict. That's it. Like you just write a story. If you have a good enough story, it's fine. Um, because even in times of peace, there's the little conflicts, and I think even one of the biggest things whenever it comes to comic books, um, one thing that I always pick apart is the Justice League comic book. Um, the Justice League is 5 to 6 members of the strongest heroes in the DC universe at all times. And because it's a monthly book, you have to basically pretend like the world is in danger every single issue. And that gets exhausting.
Yeah.
That gets so exhausting. And for me, it's the smaller stories that I care about. It's the more intimate stuff that gives you the character development and all of that. So, yeah, there is no war, but there still can be conflict. And I think being able to approach it that way means that I will be able to care about these characters a little bit more than I would if there was this grander thing happening where it's kind of stealing my attention, you know? So I think that not having the war in Star Wars is just fine.
Yeah, and especially when you're focused on the villains automatically create conflict being the point of view because they're always looking for something to fight
Yeah.
in the short term. Uh and so she said, I think what makes this show different and interesting is that it's from the perspective of the villains in Star Wars. These are people who are using the Force in their own way, dipping into the darker sides of the Force, and are doing it without being sanctioned by the larger institution, in this case, the Jedi. And I think that's the short, plain, simple version of it is that, they're like the Sith are always like conflicting with each other. They're always trying to like combat and everything. And now, granted, she says like the dark side. It may not be Sith focused because we don't know where the rule of two is at this point.
Yeah.
Um, Darth Bane could be born out of this story. We don't know in the timeline scheme. Um, so I think it's a really smart play. Obviously, we're still getting Jedi. We know that from the trailer at uh Star Wars Celebration. So we're still getting Jedi. I'm interested to see how Amanda's character is going to play out because from what we've heard, she's playing twins. So it could be very interesting to see if like twin tuition or whatever it's called, like
Yeah.
if they're like experiencing things that the other is, if the Jedi sister is like feeling the other sister do dark side stuff and it's like, I don't know what to do. Like, do I tell the Jedi, like, or do I protect my sister kind of thing? Like, could be very interesting to see.
It is going to be very interesting. I think it was you that brought up the point that, everything that is pointed towards twins whenever it comes to Star Wars is very significant in the way the story is told. And I am very, very curious on how they're going to play that through. Like you said, it could be something as the same type of relationship that Ray and Kylo had, in the sense of like being able to communicate through the Force. Um, it's going to be very interesting. Just now saying it, I think that that could be a thing. Now that we've seen it, they could actually take it but of course, again, people are going to be like, if it was that long ago, why hasn't anybody else experienced it until Rey and Kylo? It's like, because the story wasn't there, people. We've said this before.
Because Jedi died.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, but yeah, either way, I am really excited about the Acolyte. We have how long until the
Spring 2024 is all we know. Which
uh,
now
here,
it all
here's the
depends on
thing
how
though.
they do the quarters. So, especially with the
Yes,
strike, is
with
things going to be delayed? Are things going to be delayed?
are they going to be delayed, or are they going to be pushed up to fill in the gaps of content?
Well, okay, so let's think about this. Let's think about this. So Ahsoka goes 8 weeks.
Yes,
And we are starting,
the end of
that
August.
starts August 23rd. So it goes to, I believe, the first week of October.
Hmm.
And then 2 weeks later is Loki, right?
Yes. Yes. No.
So
I can't remember if it was. Is it October or is it September?
I believe it's October, October 6th. So it
Okay.
is, oh, it's a Friday. Wait,
They went back to
yeah,
Fridays.
yes.
Huh. Okay.
Because that first Wednesday is October 4th. And
Okay.
so Loki releases October 6th. And we'll have 6 episodes, which gets us
To
to November
November.
17th
Yeah.
without, like, the date being without content. We know the following week, Echo is supposed to be releasing
All in one day.
all in one day. So then you have December for Skeleton Crew to premiere.
Yeah.
Presumably, I think that's 8 episodes.
I believe so. Yeah.
So I'm thinking it's going to be a December 29th. Like Book of Boba Fett, get it in at the very end of the year. So you can say, oh, it did release in 2023.
Yeah.
Which would put us, so 8 episodes, it would put us at the end
February.
of February.
Yeah.
February 16th would be the last episode. So then you still have the MCU stuff. I know Ironheart is, I think, the next one up after Echo. Is that wrong? Is that right? I can't remember.
I can't remember if they delayed Ironheart at all, to be honest. But I think it might be.
Um, MCU Phase 5. This just has the movies. You're stupid. Um, Deadpool is supposed to be May 3rd, 2024. That's
That
definitely
is
getting delayed.
delayed. So delayed. They said that they had 2 months worth of uh shooting that they still had to do.
Yes. Okay, so 2024. Ironheart is on post production. Agatha Coven of Chaos is on post production. The other one that was set for early 2024 was Daredevil, but filming is on hiatus due to the strike. So, with Ironheart and Agatha being in post production, that would make me think they're going to try and do those because post production it's not on strike, kind of thing.
Yeah.
The visual effects companies can still work on it and everything. So, yeah.
Hmm.
But we know
Okay.
Acolyte is done.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Acolyte could be March, maybe, if we're
I
lucky.
I th- I think that's a safe spot for it.
All that to say, that's probably what you're looking at schedule-wise for Disney Plus. That also doesn't include Bad Batch season 3. Because we never know when Bad Batch season 3 is going to be released because we didn't know when season 2 is going to get
I was
released.
gonna say if it's gonna be anything like the release schedule of season 2, for a whole year, we're gonna think that it's gonna come out on one day, and then the day before we'll find out, oh nope, it's not gonna release this day. So yeah, it's gonna be a wild ride.
Who knows? Who knows?
But I think that leaves us with just Dark Force Rising. Am I correct?
Yes, it is. Can I go to the little girl's room first?
Yeah, sure thing.
Sorry, I drank too much wine.
It's all good. Gonna fill in the dead space here. Nobody's watching, but still. Katie's door just opened. Looked like a ghost came through here. For those who are just joining, we are just about to review Dark Force Rising. Taking a small break here for Katie, but it is our road to Ahsoka. So we will be talking about that and how it relates to the story that we might be seeing in the future. Are you grabbing both of your copies?
Yes, I
Show off. Show
am.
off, show off, show off.
Look,
Uh,
okay, one of my favorite series in Legends, like the Crystal Star, made me like got me interested in Star Wars. The Heir to the Empire trilogy, it made me a Star Wars fan.
so, how do you want to break this down? Um, so, uh, a big plot point in this book, and I think we should start there. Just because, um, we will get to Thrawn. We will get to Thrawn. Um, and he still in this book he has the exact same problem he did in the first book, which is he knows when things are happening across the freaking galaxy, like literally seconds after it happens.
Because he studies his enemies.
it I don't care how much you study, when you are literal planets away, galaxies away from each other. It's like Thrawn has a spidey sense. I hate it. Thrawn has a spidey sense throughout the galaxy, and something happens, and he immediately knows.
There are 3 reveals in The Last Command, which I am looking forward to talking about and seeing how that adds to your opinion.
Hmm. Because I know that there has always been conversation about, and I don't know if this is a reveal or not, so you could either deny it or say that it's not a reveal. But I know that there's always a conversation around the idea of him being force sensitive, uh, in some sort of aspect. Is from what I've heard, or remember seeing. I
I've
can't remember.
actually never heard that.
Really?
Yeah,
I think when I was doing research, there was like this idea that the reason why he was so good at being a Grand Admiral was the fact that he was uh, force sensitive. Um,
I think that the thing you have to consider there is that, especially with what you learn in this book, with there being multiple emperor's hands, you have to think, okay, would Palpatine have allowed that to survive, especially with the fact that putting Thrawn in the position of being a Grand Admiral would have given him a very close power to Grand Moff Tarkin, and putting him in a political position to be successful, which is what he
yeah,
is in this. So putting him into that position during the Empire's reign of terror is that like something that Palpatine would do.
yeah,
And I don't think it is.
that's true. Um, I guess not. Uh, I'm trying to think if there has ever been. Well, I mean, of course, the big elephant in the room being Mara Jade.
Mhm.
Uh her big thing in this book is the resurgence of some force sensitivity
Right.
that she had or has, being the emperor's right hand. So uh of course, this being your favorite character in all of Star Wars, um Mara is a bit of a conundrum to me. Uh, I understand like the inner conflict that she has. This idea of wanting to, of course, exact her revenge for the Emperor uh, on Luke Skywalker, as we saw in, or she told in, uh, I believe, the first book, um,
Yep.
to Luke when they were in the forest. Um, and then uh, she's talking about how like she's starting to get these inklings, and if the inklings are coming back, then the nightmares will start soon. Um, and then we of course get this conversation between Luke Skywalker and oh, I always forget his name.
Sabath.
um who
Hard or Sabath?
the yeah the old
Talon-Karrde, the Smuggler King.
no 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 the
Sabath, the Jedi Master, crazy
yeah,
person.
Sabath, the crazy Jedi clone. So and him and Sabath, they were like, there is another, and Luke's like, yeah, I think I know who they are. Like I've met her before. And Sabath, I know I'm jumping around, but we're kind of just throwing things out there. Sabath is a character that I'm not entirely sure what Zahn was doing. I'm sure in the grand scheme of things, in the Last Command, there will be like some like aha moment for me to be like, oh, that's how he's fitting into this story. Because of course, like the whole idea is that he is there to try to seduce Luke Skywalker for power. Um, and he's like really hammering it down when Luke finally meets him. You need to bring Leia. You need to bring the twins. Like they need to be in my control. Is basically what it comes down to. And Luke, like from the start, Luke's like, yeah, this guy. There's some screws loose, and I'm not entirely sure if I should trust this guy. Which I do like. He's not so desperate in the idea of him being lost in the sense of not having a master and him learning things on his own. He's not entirely lost to be like bending over backwards over this Jedi master to learn. He clearly sees like, hey, the stuff that this guy is doing on this planet is not okay. So I do like that they didn't dumb Luke Skywalker down, um, which is always the thing. I feel like whenever there is like, not in Star Wars in particular, but just in it's a stereotypical thing whenever like somebody greater or stronger than the hero comes up that should be like a teacher. They make the hero kind of look dumb after that, or smaller than and whatnot. Um, I'm glad they didn't do that here. But
Yeah,
I
and I with Legends, and this is a thing obviously we've seen people come at canon for. With Legends, Luke Skywalker is the hero. They don't put anybody above Luke Skywalker ever
mhm.
in these books. He is the supreme being of all things.
Uh, I don't know, because in this book, I feel like Leia had a lot more to do this book
I'm not
than
saying
Luke
like
Skywalker did.
I'm not saying like in terms of like what he has to do. I'm saying like power wise.
Okay, okay, yeah. Okay. I
Power wise
actually
and knowledge wise, he nobody puts Luke Skywalker in timeout.
nobody puts Luke Skywalker in the corner. I Speaking of Leia, I I am very, very conflicted. And I said this when we had first when I first finished the book. I just mentioned this because we were just reviewing Princess and the Scoundrel. Um,
Mhm.
I am very conflicted on how Leia is portrayed in
Okay.
this book because of how well she was portrayed in Princess and the Scoundrel. I'm like, that's the better canon. Like I like because people like head canon things and they're like, okay, this is that and whatever.
Yeah.
Um, I like Leia's grasp at her roots and wanting to become a Jedi in this book, but I like the conflict of the Princess and Scoundrel Leia in not wanting to go that route. Like I'm conflicted. Like I like her wanting to be the badass, but I'm also conflicted with like how emotionally attached I am to that idea of her like not really liking the fact that her father was Vader and she doesn't want to touch that side of like it's very muddy and murky and in her mind.
S- So just to kind of put it into perspective, so this is I think 4 years after Return of the Jedi, and Princess and the Scoundrel was right after Return of the Jedi. So
Yeah.
literally, Princess and the Scoundrel was her just finding out, hey, Vader's my father. Oh crap! Like, what do I do? She does go through a lot of that, and I'm just gonna go ahead and jump to this. You're gonna kind of see that in, I think, the next book,
But I
because it
believe
skips ahead.
Yeah, I
And
believe Han at one point does say though, in this book that like him and Leia never had like honeymoon like at all.
yeah,
That they had like 1 month or I c- or it has I can't remember the was it that they haven't seen each other in a month or whatever that they didn't have.
so yeah, they didn't have the time together because Heir to the Empire, this trilogy is taking place over like 2 years, 3 years, all total. So they go a month without seeing each other, and that's like what they run into with her being a leader of the New Republic and everything. Um, so they do. It's the one I was going to get you to read, with the Princess and the Scoundrel, and then we ran out of time and everything.
Oh,
Is
the
the courtship of Princess Leia.
yes.
So that and Tatooine Ghost are kind of like the engagement honeymoon story
Okay. Okay.
right
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Yeah.
I don't know how that I remember all this stuff. It makes me laugh every time. But yeah, and I that's something that I can greatly appreciate about the Legends books is because I feel like it's telling a grander story, especially this one. It's telling a grander story over that time period, and it's like telling you, hey, it takes 4 days to get to Coruscant. It takes 2 days to get to Tatooine. Yada 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 yada. So,
Yeah. Uh, Andrew says here, in Heir to the Empire film, what are the chances of a young Han, Luke, and Leia showing up? I think the only one showing up is young Luke.
uh, I could see a grand reunion spectacular attempted, like in the very end of the movie. And like I definitely see Luke being a major part, I think.
Yeah.
But like I see, hey, we're gonna get Han and Leia, we're gonna put the trio together back on screen kind of thing. I think that's gonna happen.
I don't know. I it's gonna be very difficult to see the reactions to
Yeah,
seeing a CGI AI Leia on screen.
yeah,
It,
for
it's
sure.
it's it's gonna be a little weird. Um,
So going
but
back to Luke, because I think we talked about Leia. Or
mhm.
did you have anything left on Leia that you want
Well,
to talk about?
Leia, I do like the uh of course she is always uh a woman of action. She always is like, "Hey, I'm going to do this and nobody's going to stop me." Um and she's even like this with twins
Hmm.
still inside of her. Like she is uh uh what is the Nogri is
Yeah,
she goes to the home planet of the Nogri, and uh the the idea of her meeting them uh after the only thing was the attempt on her life with the assassination attempts, and
yeah.
like even Han brings it up. He's like, are you like you're seriously doing this when they just tried to kill us in like three different places? And I really like how she is this woman of action, but she is still always going to be the person that wants to genuinely help. Because
Yes.
that's the really big thing here is when she finally, after investigation and just connecting the dots, she's like, this whole thing with your planet and it dying and everything else, it didn't happen just like all of a sudden. Like it, she finds out, oh, this has been happening since the Clone Wars. Like, and if that's the case, then they've been manipulating you guys, and this is your reason to like leave the Empire,
Yeah.
basically. So
Yeah.
I really do like that.
And it's a really good move, and that's what a lot of Leia looks like in before the New Jedi Order series with the Yuzon Vong and everything.
Mhm.
It's a lot of, hey, we're gonna go to this planet and try to bring them into the Republic or figure out how we can help, like crises to solve and everything. Um, so Andrew, I see your questions, by the way. Um, I'm gonna come back to them after we get done with the discussion on Dark Force Rising, if that's okay. I don't want to get off topic too much, especially for podcast listeners later on. Um, so yeah, that's a lot of what Leia looks like in Star Wars Legends. Did you have anything else for Luke in this book? I know you said you
Um,
think he's like kind of left to the wayside, and I agree, but I think it's necessary to finalize the rest of the trilogy and kind of bring together everything in the story.
I'm trying to think if there's anything specific that I can remember for this book in particular. Because I'm starting to remember I might have started the beginning of Last Command, I think. Uh, but I think it was this
So
one.
the last part of this book is then kind of finalizing the battle with the Katana fleet.
Yes. Um, and I mean, honestly, the Katana fleet is like the major talk here. Um, but uh I think with Luke, we can just get past, because I think I've said everything with Luke. I think he
Okay.
is still, um of course he has his doubts. Like I said, he has his doubts about being the individual of like being the Jedi master. And so he wants somebody to teach him more. Which I think is, it's smart to do. Like, this is a weight that's on his shoulders. There's moments, um which I do like the amount of power that they give him. He has like this like uh force photogenic memory at one point,
Mhm.
where like he is literally
Really cool.
rewinding a moment that he just had. And then like I believe it was oh man, who was it?
Lando, because they were looking
Lando.
for Now's barrier.
Yeah, Lando was like, "Oh, I smell this smoke on you. Do you recognize this description?" And Luke was like, "Hold on, let me check." And he literally went into his memory bank and he recognized the person. He's like, "Yeah," and he went this way, this corridor, going to this hangar. I thought that was really cool. But like the weight of the weight of a Jedi at this time period that is on his shoulders, he goes to he's at a cantina when a fight breaks loose. And they're like, fine. The only person that can settle this is that dude right over there. And everybody's pointing at Luke Skywalker. And Luke Skywalker's like, what? Me? Are you sure? Like, I'm not entirely sure. And that's when they said, like, yeah, you're the Jedi Master here. You have authority over all of us. And
Yeah.
Luke doesn't really see it that way, but he can kind of say, like, okay, like, you're looking at me in light of like me saving the galaxy, quote unquote. So I do have this kind of responsibility. And so he like helps them negotiate. I think that's really cool. It does give the character of Luke Skywalker responsibility. Um
Yeah.
and not just like this heroic figure that's just gonna go in, kick ass, take names, and win the day. Like, he actually has to think about his choices, which I really do enjoy.
Yeah, and it's a neat tie-in that Timothy Zahn actually works back in to Outbound Flight, which is the book that tackles the original Joris Sabath, and the Outbound Flight project and meeting Thrawn for the first time and everything. But he works that mediation that we see in Jor I can't remember the planet where he's like trying to train Luke on, and then like the negotiations and the mediation with Luke. It's a thread that Zahn likes to continue with the rest of his work in Star Wars for sure.
Yeah.
All right, Mara in this book. I know you said she's conflicted, but it's because of the resurgence of power, and basically what it ends up being is it's a mental block that Palpatine has put in, and it's something that forces her to return to him, kind of thing. Um, to make sure that she can continue with her powers is what it kind of ends up being. And so the mental block kind of wanes and goes back and forth over the 5 year period. Yeah, it's 5 years after Return of the Jedi, because that's what she said in the book. So does that make sense about what's kind of going on?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so I like that she's conflicted in this book. Especially like when she has to go find Luke to help her rescue Card off of Thrawn's chimera. Because like she's like, I don't know who else to call. Like Card's people don't trust me. Like,
I like Card just because, like, he is. I think he might be a little bit more of a suave. Like, he's more suave than Lando.
mhm.
Like, just the way he talks, he carries himself. Of course, he's like this like all time high smuggler. You know, um, I just love the guy. Um, and he's not afraid to like throw around that kind of like authority of him being the smuggler, because there's a moment where he is talking to Mon Mothma, and that freaking asshole from the entire story. The one that accuses Han of treason, basically.
First, Phalia.
Yeah, Phalia. I hated Phalia, but I love the trope. This trope of like, of course, uh, Phalia has this idea of like basically government greed of like being at like he's high up on the table, so he has power, and that's all that it is. It's absolute what is it uh absolute power corrupts, and I don't remember the saying, but basically that power corrupts. And this whole time, since the very beginning of the book to the very end of the book, is Han is the main person following Valia's story because it
Mhm.
interacts with him the most. Um and like the moment that like Thalia catches Han like sneaking up on them, Thalia is like, "Oh, he's a corporate spy. Like he's a spy. And he's a spy for the Empire. Kill him now. Kill." Like and like they're not letting him like they're not letting them like interrogate Han or anything. That he's just demanding, "Kill him. You just like don't ask any questions. Just kill him." It's like, okay, that you're oversharing your hand here. Like you're showing all of your cards just trying to get Han killed. Like
Yep.
truly, like there is something wrong with this situation. Um and
I'm
then
gonna jump in. Andrew, this is Dark Force Rising. This is the second book in the Heir to the Empire trilogy.
yes. The idea also in the very end, when like the whole fight with the Katana fleet happens, um and Leia and Card like turn on the microphone for the entire speaker to go throughout the ship, and Feli's just like, "Hey, everybody below me is below me. I don't care what they say. They have to follow my rules. I don't. I'll leave everybody for dead if it means my safety." And like, it's so good. It's a very very like repetitive trope in these types of situations, but it's so good just to see the smug guys like just eat it. I love it. I love it so much.
You
Um
want to know a fun fact, though?
what?
Phalia ends up the chief of state of the New Republic
What? Don't
years later, but
what? How is he not in prison after this?
top quote from the Chief of State section on Forrest Cavalia's Wikipedia page. Chief Phalia, you are a poor excuse for a sentient being. I hope one day you really smell the stink in your heart and choke on the fumes. You're very young. When you've accomplished a fraction of what I have for the people of this galaxy, come back and we'll talk again. That was Jaina
No,
Solo and Borsk Phalia.
no, you don't give him a second chance. Like he literally like he took an entire fleet and was like, "Hey, like because the big point was, hey, leave them to die. Let's get out of here."
Yep.
And they're like, "Okay, but these are people who have risked their lives for the entire galaxy. We're not just going to leave them out of here." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm in command here. I have the authority. Do as I say." Um Also, MVP Wedge. Like Wedge is
Wedge.
he risked everything helping
Mhm.
them out, to the point when they come out of hyperspace and they're like, "Hey, you're all under arrest." Wedge is basically like, "You and what army?" Like it's basically is like he's like, "What if I run? What if you can't catch me? What are we gonna do now?" Wedge is fucking insane. I
Why do you think I
love
named
him.
my dog after him?
I love Wedge. Like he had a very small part in this book for but just for that instance when he was literally going to be put in cuffs, he's like, "Catch me, dude. Like, you're gonna have to take me out of this freaking ship over my dead body."
Yeah.
Basically, was what he was saying, and that is awesome.
He's great, and if you liked him in this moment, highly Rogue Squadron books. Like it's just even better. Way better.
Yeah.
Um okay. So we've kind of talked about all the main characters, I feel like. And other than Thrawn,
Mm-hmm.
we kind of you briefly touched on Thrawn.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of doing the same thing that he did in Heir of the Empire.
He did
Again.
he did a lot of the same thing. It was a lot of like Luke would do something and he'd be like, "Oh, intuition, Luke's gonna do this, go catch him," and like, "Oh, Leia's gonna do this, go." Like the only time
What
that
about
they
Delta Source? What about Delta Source?
Delta Source remind me.
Spy on Coruscant.
Spy on Coruscant, which
And it's an intelligence source for the Empire on Coruscant. That is all the information I can give you because Delta Source is revealed in the last command.
okay. So that's why it doesn't ring that big of a bell.
It's mentioned, and
Yeah.
Pelion talks about it. And he's like, "Damn it! I wish Thrawn would tell me what Delta Source is and like how to get in contact with it." Like,
Okay. That's true. So, yeah, he does have his little birds that tell him things. But still, it irks me because without the context and without you really learning about that immediately, like the way that Timothy Zahn writes these chapters is literally Lando and Han will make a decision. The very next chapter is Thrawn being like, "Hey, so I think they're gonna do this," and you're like, "What the hell?" Like, like Han and Lando on a completely different planet, just talking amongst themselves. How in the world did he figure this out? It's so annoying. Like honestly, like there is no fun. Like when you're a little kid, I don't know if you ever did this as a kid, but when I was a little kid and I was playing pretend with my friends, if there was one of my friends that was like, I'm just the most powerful and I get to do this because I said so, like that brings all of the fun out of it. Like you can't have like this omnipotent being that gets the control of the playing board because it's just boring. It is. Like I think the only time that I feel that I had like that feeling that he was actually somewhat caught off guard was Leia's time, and it's not even that he was caught off guard, it was that he didn't know that Leia
when she
was.
leaves the Falcon in Endor's orbit.
Yeah. And when she is with the Nogri, like Zahn does Zahn Thrawn didn't know about that. She hid well
Yeah.
enough, you know. Uh and there is a split second that Leia like held her lightsaber. She was like, I could probably kill him right here. I could probably do it. And like again, Jedi are better than I. Because if I was Leia, I would have chunked that lightsaber right at him. Just like
Well,
end it right there.
the biggest thing, right, is Thrawn is the Nogari's Lord and Master at that point. She had not said, "Hey, they've been tricking you guys and just keeping
She
your
hadn't
food."
convinced them yet. So if she
Yeah.
did kill Thrawn, then like they would have been like, hey, like there's something very fishy here in regards to you trying to convince us and then you automatically just killing Thrawn. Like, yeah, it would have muddied the waters for sure.
Yeah.
Um but I did like the connection that she was making with the Nogri. The example of like putting the droplets of rain or whatever onto the plant and like immediately eroding in front of the crowd and everybody being like,
Mhm.
"Oh shit!" Like that's like that's not good. Like clearly
Yeah.
we are on the wrong side of history here.
Yeah. what did you think about getting to know the Nogri more? I know you said like you were not truly convinced by them in the previous in Heir to the Empire. So like what did you think about learning more about their homeland and like why they're doing what they're doing?
I I get it. The big thing was, the fact that they like genuinely respected Darth Vader. And that was their in for Leia. Was like,
Mhm.
oh, she's the daughter of the Lord Vader, as they call him. Um and you know, I really liked how she connected uh with the grandmother of oh, I forgot the Nogri that helped her. Um it was like she was like the leader. That's all I remember,
Um, oh, that is
because uh she explained how she had four sons and all of them died. And then that's when Leia was like, "Well, if you had four sons and they died, what about him?" And she's like, "Oh, he's the son of my son." And that's when Leia finally realized, like, "Oh, this has been happening for generations.
yep.
So it must have
Because she
been,
kept calling him this her third son.
yeah, it must have happened during the Clone Wars." I really enjoyed the character moments with Leia on the Nogri planet. Um uh just because it showed her patience, it showed her compassion. Uh Again, the whole moment with Han being like, "Hey, these people wanted to kill you at one point. You're still wanting to help them." Like it she even told them, like, if we knew that this was happening, we would have come to help. And she does,
Yeah.
like, kind of, she didn't rescind her comments, but she does say in her mind, like, we would have come to help. Whether we had the resources to do so, that's another question.
Yeah.
Just because she knew how vast the war was kind of spreading them thin. Um, so I do like that about her.
Yeah. Um, okay, so I think the last thing then to talk about is the katana flute. So what I said was in the um last week we got the last what I think is the last Ahsoka trailer. And somebody pointed out that there is a Star Forge, which you said was a reference, or they said what looks like a Star Forge in the trailer. And you said that that is a reference to Knights of the Old Republic.
Yes.
And I looked it up. The Star Forge is basically a way to build high-powered ships, kind of thing.
Yes.
It,
Hmm.
long story short. So what I said was maybe they're using that in replacement of the katana fleet.
I thought that would be kind of cool. Um, just because it would be a reference to one of the most popular games in the Star Wars fandom, but
Mhm.
also tied into a very popular story, which is Heir to the Empire. Um,
Yep.
and I think that they're so similar in, I guess, the MacGuffin for the story, that
Hmm.
people would immediately like, "Oh, like, I get that. I understand what that is." Um, Whether it be people who read Heir to the Empire, but don't know what the Starforge is, but they see what the Starforge is, and they hear, like, a couple words of dialogue, and they're like, "Oh, this is, like, the Katana Fleet. Like, that's what that is."
Yeah. My
So I
my
think it would
only
be
thing,
cool.
sorry.
No, I just think that it would be a cool replacement for it.
Yeah. My only thing is that at where we're at for the Mandalorian, the New Republic is trying to demilitarize. They still have like obviously we saw like the patrol squadrons and everything. Um but they are trying to demilitarize and decentralize the military.
Hmm.
So I guess my question would be, how would that, you think, play in to the Imperial remnant and like the New Republic? Because like in the end, we know, okay, the New Republic is hurting for ships, especially after the crisis at the beginning of the book, the end of Heir to the Empire. I can't remember. Um, they're hurting for ships, especially after the mole miner incident. And so they are desperate for the ships, which is why the Katana fleet is so interesting for the High
Yeah.
Council and everything. So when Card brings it, he's like, did this. And so that would be my only thing is how would that fit in into canon?
Well, I think that the Starforge itself, um, the idea that, because yes, it can be used for like strong ships, but I think more so the in the game, it was more so referenced as like a weapon, like the ultimate weapon. Of
Yeah.
course, that weapon being to be able to build ships and whatever. Um, but we saw kind of like an ultimate weapon in the Rise of Skywalker
Hmm.
and a giant fleet at at the Rise of Skywalker.
So you thinking maybe Thrawn gets it and he totes it off for the First Order to use?
I think so. Or Palpatine
Ooh,
for the uh for the giant fleet that's at the end of the Rise of Skywalker.
that could be a good move. That could be a good way to connect everything. Yeah.
Because I
I
think,
did for
well,
sorry. No, you're good.
for us, we know, just because of the way Star Wars is, the end of Revenge of the Sith, it very much feels like the Sith have won, but there is
Hmm.
a new hope with the twins. The Return of the Jedi is a win on the light side. And then, of course, A Force Awakens, we see that, you know, the tables have kind of skewed a little bit. The only way to make it feel like the tables have skewed is that the dark side or the New Order or whatever needs to win in some capacity. And I think that the Starforge, would be their win. And I think that's what leans into what we will see with The Force Awakens.
I think that's a very good idea. It would be a very smart play. 100%.
Hmm.
So I think the last thing, because I did forget about this character, Senator Garm Bell Iblis, Corellian senator,
Hmm.
knows Han from school days. What did you think about his character?
He was kind of just thrown in there. I don't remember any kind of reference to him. I don't know if he is referenced in other Legends books or if he is very much there. He was referenced to be on, I believe, Hoth. He was in the Battle of Hoth. I believe that's what was referenced in the book. Um, but he is apparently a very big person, well-known person that was thought to be dead. Um, and he, like, I don't necessarily know this, understood the secrecy around him. Um, because from what I remember, he talked to Han and like explained his whole backstory about how, like, oh, I've been keeping an eye on you. Han made that joke of like, oh, you probably weren't proud of some of the choices I made. He's like, yeah, but I knew you'd come around. Um, but we literally don't see him again until the very end of the book. When he finally comes in to help out with the Katana fleet. Um, I mean, he might play a bigger role in the Last Command, and that's where I see him kind of shine. Um, but like, I think he finally even shows up with Leia on the scene, and Leia's like, "Oh, I thought you were dead," and they're like, he was like, "Yeah, a lot of people did. So what? Here I am now. Like, I'm here to help." Uh,
So he does have a lot to do in um The Last Command. He is particularly known for being a part of the Force Unleashed video game, comic, and novel. So that's where he's prevalent. He does make appearances later on, as like the timeline goes on, but he is also in the Revenge of the Sith novelization, and the Rise of Darth Vader, and then several of the Han Solo books. He's mentioned them. So that's kind of where he's at. For me, um, to me, I think Saw Gerrera kind of actually took his place in canon because he was known for being more militant, and that's why he and Mon Mothma kind of disagreed.
oh, see, you said he was famous for the Force Unleashed, and I was like, where was he in Force Unleashed? And now I see who he is. I didn't know that that was the same character. Very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is his introduction into canon because Dark Force Rising came out before the video game.
Yeah,
But he was heavily present in there as one of the rebel leaders.
yeah. Um, I I want to see more of him to kind of grasp a little bit more on what I think of him like as a as a leader because I feel like he is going to be put in that position in Last
Mhm.
Command. I mean, with the way they commented on him, like they're not just going to put him in the background; they're going to put him in the forefront. Um, but I am curious to see how he will interact with Han, because uh, he knows Han, he's kept up with Han, um, but at the same time, I feel like Han is an individual that can be a loose cannon depending on the situation that he's in.
Yeah.
Um, and with uh, with Bell's background, I think that can mean that they can bump heads a lot. Uh,
Mhm.
and I'm curious to see if that happens in the Last Command.
Yeah. Interesting to see. So where would you rank these Heir to the Empire and Dark Force Rising? Is this
Um,
better than Heir to the Empire? Is it worse?
I think I like this book a lot more than Heir to the Empire. Um, there was a
Because it
lot.
has less Thrawn in it.
It does have less Thrawn. That was literally
Yeah.
what I was about to say. It does have less Thrawn. It has more of the characters that I do want to see more of. Um, I have no idea when Princess Leia is due to pop, but she can very much feel the twins, um, and they are interacting with her through the Force in some capacity. She can very much feel it. So,
So the Last Command takes place 2 to 3 years after this book.
oh, see, I didn't know that. I
Yeah.
didn't know that. So that's going to be very interesting to see also.
So the Palpatine where Luke falls to the dark side
Yeah.
comic.
Mhm.
That takes place between this and everything.
Oh, then I'm gonna have to read that before. Like I've like skimmed it. It's been a very long time since I have read that, but I may want to read up on it before I pick up Last Command again.
You got 1 week.
I do got 1 week, but I think I could finish it in 1 week also.
Also, shameless plug. You should go check out World's Finest True Believers, where Chris and I reviewed the first volume of that comic. Um,
How many
so
volumes is it?
I think it's 3 volumes total.
Okay. Yeah, I think if I read all three in one day, I think I could do it. But that
I'm
would
gonna
just
try and
mean
get it.
more late. That would mean more late nights for me listening to the audio book. Oh, I never
I
get
will
to
try
sleep.
and read it with you. So that way we can talk about both. Who knows? Okay, so Andrew has had some questions for us in the chat. So he said, after Mando season 2 and ND5, I think it's definitely possible with the technology talking about a young Han, Luke, and Leia. I'm not gonna go too far into this. We both hate this idea, plain and
It
simple.
we hate the idea, but wouldn't be surprised if the studio decided to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you can even go back to last week where we talked about it too, with I think Mark Hamill made a comment about,
Hmm.
yeah, I hate this. And we were like, well, then stop taking the money, Mark. Um, okay, so his next question, and the reason I'm rushing, guys, is Marvel Alliance is jumping on in 20 minutes.
That is true. I completely forgot about it, and then I got a notification that they were coming on. I was like, "Oh no!"
So he asked, what are your favorite Legends books? Oh, or canon? He said in the last one, and he said, I'm looking for recommendations. So for me, this trilogy, this Heir to the Empire trilogy, is one of my favorites. Like I said at the beginning, it's the reason I became a Star Wars fan in general, is getting to know the galaxy and getting to see a bigger step in trying to resolve the Empire and creating the New Republic in general. Also, I fell in love with my favorite character ever, Mara Jade. Um, there are a great many Legends books to offer. It all kind of depends on what kind of thing you're looking for. I do find the trilogies are the best ways to get the most out of the story. There are a lot of them. I highly recommend the New Jedi Order. That is a book series of 20 books. And it's a giant conflict with an alien race that came from another galaxy. Um, so it's a great way to dive in and kind of get a complete story. It very much feels like the High Republic. The other one is if you're looking for Luke to like train Jedi, if you're like, I'm desperate for this in canon, the Jedi Academy trilogy is a great way to get nibbles in that. Just be careful about your format. So obviously, paperback and e-readers are going to contain the full book, but if you go to Audible, you have to be careful about abridged audiobooks versus unabridged. Um, Typically, anything published after 2008 got an unabridged audiobook, and then most everything, and I verified this with Tom, most everything under the Essential Legends collection has an unabridged audiobook. So, just as a forewarning for Legends books, what are your favorite canon books?
Well, I was gonna say for Legends also, just because I became a really big fan of it after I read it, is the Darth Bane trilogy.
Yeah,
Um, go. We
that's a good
did
one.
review those. You can go check those out at the.
We actually never did the last one.
Oh, we didn't. That's right. We just did the first two. Go check out those reviews. Very, very fun. Love the trilogy. Um, but as far as canon, it really depends on, like Katie said, what suits your fancy. Like, in all honesty, if you are a really big Luke Skywalker fan, the most recent Shadow of the Sith is a very, very good book. Highly, highly recommended. Or if you're wanting to step away from the Skywalker sandbox, I recommend anything within High Republic.
Yeah.
It has been a very, very fun ride. Um, Having a villain that is not a Sith, and kind of still outwit the Jedi is a very interesting concept with the Nihil. So go check that out. The first book is, I believe, the Path
Light of the Jedi.
Light of the Jedi. That's right. Yeah, yeah. So go check that out. Really, really fun book.
I second the High Republic stuff, but the other good thing about canon is that they've tried to branch out into other genres that aren't just like action, Star Wars, conflict kind of thing. So like we talked in depth about Princess and the Scoundrel. So um like if you're looking at a book and you're like, I don't know, we've reviewed probably since 2021, we've reviewed every single Star Wars book that's come out. So
Yes.
you can go look for the title. And then if you are like, hey, I'm not sure about this book, I'm looking for some insight, just send us a DM on Twitter. You can also email us at Star Wars Alliance about the A in the Wars at gmail.com. Very important, don't forget it. And then Clay has the phone number.
Yes, the phone number is right here. Let me go ahead and grab it. Remember, we do have a Star Wars Alliance hotline. So, once again, that phone number is 830-538-4828. You can text or leave a voicemail. You don't have to leave all of your personal information, just a first
Mhm.
name or a screen name, so that way we can acknowledge you while we talk about it here live on the show. But if you text me, I will receive it on our hotline phone. If you email us, we will both receive it. Katie is usually on top of those, though. But yeah, looking forward to any and all feedback. You can leave a review for the show for us and
Yep.
whatnot. And sometimes, depending on what is going on with us, we use those reviews and feedback and interactions with the email and hotline for giveaways. So just keep that in mind.
Speaking of which, I haven't plugged this, but we do have a giveaway for the Blade Phase 2 High Republic comic. What we're looking for, and I'm gonna put 2 weeks on this because I've just been swamped. But send us a text, send us an email, tell us your favorite Star Wars character. If it's High Republic, tell us it's High Republic. And what you're looking forward to with the High Republic Phase 3. So that's two things. Um, so yeah, the other thing Andrew asked about is, do y'all have a Discord server? We do not have a Discord server. If there's interest, we could potentially do something. I'm just terrible with social media. So
I will say
Multiverse
this. Uh
has a social
go
has a Discord.
go check out the Geekverse. There is a section for Star Wars shows and the books that we sometimes go on to. So go check that out. Snell and Taylor usually read the adult novels for the High
Yep.
Republic. I think I don't know if Taylor is reading the Red Blade right now or not. But they're usually
He
on
is.
top a lot of the Star Wars stuff. Snell has just wanted to take a break from Phase 2 just because there was a large timeline gap
Hmm.
backwards instead of forwards. But with Phase
I don't
3,
think he would have liked the books anyways.
yeah, I don't think he would have been a really big fan of them. But I think they are going to be jumping back into it with Phase 3.
So yeah, that is it. Everything. Andrew, thanks for the comment on the great show tonight. Thanks for being in the chat. We are here every Wednesday night, y'all. Typically 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Next week, we are doing 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Just kind of again, summer vacation and everything. So if you miss us one week, we'll be back the next. But we next week we are talking about the last command in our road to Ahsoka. That is the last book in the Heir to the Empire trilogy. Interested to see how it all comes together for Clay. Like, and y'all, I know I'm not talking a lot during these books. I don't want to overwhelm Clay with how much I love these books. Everybody, I've talked in great depth about how this is one of my favorite trilogies. So this is mainly for Clay to get to know the Thrawn that I love and adore. So, that is what you can expect from the show next week. And then don't forget, in August, we are going to be going through Rebel Season 3, Tarkin, which is a canon Star Wars book. And then Rebel Season 4, and then we will be into Ahsoka with the first 2 episodes. So, Clay, tell us where they can find you.
Of course, you can always find me at Fanboy Clay on Twitter. On Threads, you can find me at Fanboy Clay and the number 1010, Fanboy Clay 10. So go check me out there. I am, of course, the host of Ranger Alliance as well. We will be putting up another episode next week. And I do have a show outside of the network called Batman News Weekly. So go check that out as well.
Yes, and y'all, you can find me on any social media platform. It's at Space with Katie. Um, this show you can find on Twitter. It's at Star Wars Alliance without the A in the wars. Very important. Don't forget it. Remember, if you have reviews, comments, questions, you can always send us a DM or you can email us, Star Wars Alliance, that same username that's on Twitter, at gmail.com. Remember, there's no A in wars. Don't forget it. The hotline where you can text or leave us a voicemail is 830-538-4828. Remember, if you use the phone number or the email, please just give us a name where we can reference you on the show. And as always, if you're following along with us with Rebels or you're following along with us on these books, we'd love to hear some comments if you want to share what you're thinking with these. So yeah. My other show on the Geek Ultimate Podcast Network is coming to a close. But Mission Impossible 7 will be out Sunday, next Sunday, September. Oh my gosh, mind blown. July 23rd. So you can check out Mark and I's review on that. That was a great episode. We really just dove in to everything. So you can check that out then. But then I will also be reviewing Barbie with, oh my gosh, Brendan from Brian. Oh my gosh, why did I say Brendan? Brian from Film Fragments. Sorry, y'all, it's been a day. So Barbie will be next Monday, July 24th, and then the show will come to a close with Oppenheimer on the 31st. And remember, so you can check those episodes out, Slice of Film 1 on Twitter. So yeah, I think that draws us to a close. I want to thank everybody for listening or watching, whatever time of day you're here, and we will see y'all next time. May the force be with you.